Welcome everybody to the panel today for Papier 2020, hosted by AGAC, the Association of Contemporary Art Galleries. Today we're going to be looking on how the pandemic has affected the art market and all of us, what we do, and the artists in Canada right now who are living through it, and maybe we'll come up with some ideas for what's going to be on the other side. So to start, I'll just briefly introduce who I am, and then each of the panelists will talk about what they do. I'm Christine Redfern. I am the director curator of Elephant, a gallery I started 4.5 years ago in Montreal. The specialty of Elephant is digital, video, kinetic, VR, technology, and art. And that's where we fit in the art market. As a commercial, it's a commercial art gallery, and we represent 12 Canadian, Quebec and Ontario artists. Sarah, would you like to go next? Or?
Sure, thanks Christine. I'm Sara Angel, and I am the founder and executive director of the Art Canada Institute, which is dedicated to Canadian art history research, education, and promotion. We specialize in creating online content to document the history of Canadian art. And we now have an audience, we've reached an audience of over 1 million in more than 60 countries who find us online. And in doing so, I have less of an expertise in the art market per se, but I believe that the content we're creating online is essential to the art market in that it drives people to learn about art education, artists, and so forth.
I'm Stephen Bulger. I own the Stephen Bulger Gallery in Toronto. And we're a street level commercial gallery. I started wanting to be a photographer that would have exhibitions in a gallery like this one. But while I was studying at Ryerson, I started to gravitate towards curation, and then to open up my own gallery. So it's really all based on the medium of photography. So we deal in historical, modern, and contemporary. And we deal in both the primary and the secondary markets, and have been an active participant at art fairs for, well, I guess 25 years. We did one in the very first year that we were open. And we also have, as of about 3 years ago, gotten more aggressive with an online presence, and that's certainly ramped up in the last 2 years.
I'm Leah Sandals. I'm content editor at Canadian Art, which is Canada's most widely read art magazine. In that capacity, I sometimes have written stories related to auctions and art sales, art fairs, and the art market in Canada. So I'm here to, I guess, share some of that perspective.
So if we start by just looking back, how has the pandemic affected your day-to-day operations, or how you see what's going on right now? How has it changed since March? Just whoever wants to jump in.
I'm happy to go first. For the Art Canada Institute, not only do we produce content online, but we also in our workspace, we're more remote than we are meeting in person a lot. So our workspace hasn't changed that much. But in terms of our the content that we offer, we've had a surge in interest that has it's probably increased by about 500 or 600%. And of course, it's because people are at home reading more. But we're constantly in contact with our audience who have been throughout the pandemic saying, wow, there are great videos on your site that we had never seen before. There's this material. So what it tells me is that while people might not be in the gallery space, there's a phenomenal interest in Canadian art right now, and people are any absence of seeing it in the real world, people are happily turning to the virtual world for it, and seemingly have quite an insatiable appetite for it.
Stephen, have you found that it's how has it affected the gallery and what you're working on?
Well, it's certainly been quiet. We shut down fairly early on, and my staff has been at home, I guess now for 8 weeks or whatever it is. And I'm lucky because I live a 10-minute walk from the gallery. So I've been coming here, 5 to 6 days a week, and putting in fairly full days trying to really bring the gallery outside, because so much of our business relies on people coming to us. But I felt that it was the time where I have to be a bit more proactive. And we've been doing that in a few different ways. Like one, we started making little video tours of the gallery and the gallery's exhibition that was sort of cut in the middle, or the stoppage happened in the middle of an exhibition by Andre Kertész. So we just tried to, I guess, formalize a lot of things that we do on a more casual basis, because, I spend my day talking about photographs, and usually it's a one-on-one thing, whereas now it's quite a bit different, because the first ones I was using an iPhone and trying to hold it at a distance and try to keep myself in the frame, and just trying to have a normal conversation. But it was fairly awkward because it's just, I'm not used to working in that manner, because there is no retort. Like usually I respond to people's questions, whereas here I'm making a presentation trying to imagine what people's questions might be. And we got a really good response to it. People found them informative, and like what Sarah was saying, I think people are starved for content that's not on Netflix. And so we kept doing more of them. And then I guess at around that time, Heffel Auction House approached me about the idea of doing an auction, an online auction with them. And I thought it was a good experiment. And so we put together an auction with them that's in 2 sessions, one of Canadian material and the other of international. And I'm trying to see if it's a new way for the gallery to present itself. So whereas auctions usually are all secondary market material and usually historical, I wanted to replicate what we do here. So the auction is a mix of historical work that the gallery owns, as well as historical work that's owned by third-party consigners, as well as some work that's in the primary market. So it belongs to the artists that we represent, and we're using the auction house as a way to present their work. And then for each lot, or basically each sort of section of lots, we did one-on-one video explanation. So the same type of discussion I would expect to have if I was standing side by side someone looking at a piece of art. I did that into a camera, and that's posted online with the auction.
And the content, was it something, is it like something you curated, or was this in conjunction with Heffel, or how did you?
It was in conjunction. What I did, I think I selected, we thought we would have about 40 pieces was the number that they thought made sense for them. And so I think I selected 105 pieces. Then they selected, 30 or so that they thought would do really well. And then I selected about 10, and then they had also said, oh, do you have anything more like this one? Mm-hmm. And so in the end, I think we ended up, for a while we were at number 45, but then when I realized that was Donald Trump's number, I consciously decided to make it 46.
I didn't know he had a number, but there you go.
That's one of his numbers anyway.
Okay. I've seen some of the work on Instagram for that you've been posting for the auction as well. So I've seen them there.
We're active with Instagram as well. Like it's in two ways. Like one, the COVID interrupted a 25th anniversary party that we had scheduled, and it gave me a chance to look back. So for the last couple of months on Instagram, we've been going through our first 25 years of exhibitions, and posting an image from one of those from those exhibitions, as well as a short descriptor. And then during the auction, we sort of suspended that and are showing the photographs one-on-one. Because what we find, we have different people that look at us through Facebook and Instagram, as well as through photo, as well as through the various websites that we're attached to. So we're just trying to constantly put content out on each platform.
Right. Leah, how has your day-to-day changed?
Well, I think, I don't work daily in the art market, so I'm not sure how useful it is, the topic in terms of our workflow.
With culture and just your relationship with the art world and how you approach it and just
well, I'm curious about you too, just as to how it's affecting your day-to-day as well, Christine. So I'll just put that out there, that I'd love to hear more about that too. In terms of thinking about what we do every day at Canadian Art, of course, everybody's pretty much working from home for the most part. A lot of the work I was doing already was mostly online, mostly research over the telephone and online. So my work personally has not been so affected. But when I think about how the art market in general in Canada may have been impacted by all these shutdowns, what really comes to mind for me is that, that in my limited experience, the art market dealings tend to be very face-to-face. That's my impression as an observer, that there's a lot of like personal relationship building or personal face-to-face storytelling that's involved, relationship building, and sometimes an incidental quality of people dropping by an art gallery. So I think it's much harder to replicate, or I wonder how hard it is to replicate those kinds of interactions and habits online, because online is its very own, very particular platform. And it's one in which I think different forms of storytelling work differently than in person. And for another thing, I think what I've observed with some of the international online sales platforms like Artsy and Paddle8 is that they haven't had as much success as they may have hoped to. Like my general impression is that maybe there's a particular kind of art that sells particularly well online, or a particular approach to curating a program of secondary market works that works well online, or people like Heffel organizations like Heffel, led by people with the last name Heffel, have a strong understanding of what works well in a live auction versus what works well in an online auction. And because I don't do that work myself, I don't know exactly what those criteria are, but I'm very curious about it. Like I'm curious about whether, what kinds of works sell better online than others. How does like an auction house or a gallerist prepare for a successful online sale? When it comes to auctions in particular, live auctions, there's such a theater to them that seems to happen in a very particular physical space, again, from my just impressions of it as an observer. So I'm wondering how, whether the same can be achieved online.
Right.
As much as I love the online space and I love so many things that happen online, it's such a different context than the face-to-face at the art fair or in the gallery showing people stuff from the back room that's in storage. So I'm curious about what you and again, Stephen, bring to this. And, as somebody who collects art, Sarah, whether you feel like, I'm not sure how much collecting you do, but whether you feel your own collecting habits are affected by this too?
I certainly know from my audience, the Art Canada Institute's audience is primarily people who are really interested in art, and interested in supporting it through buying it, through learning about it. And something that I've heard, which has really struck me, is that although people aren't going into galleries right now, they're feeling like there's an accessibility to the art market that they haven't had before, precisely through things like the sort of videos that Stephen's been doing, or the auction that he talked about. Because although there are often people who have the ability to purchase art, there's often a feeling that it's not a world that I belong in, or it's not a world that I know enough about, and even a reluctance to ask questions to somebody who, you know, has a very welcoming gallery space like Stephen, and who is in person very welcoming, just because of a barrier of knowledge. But one of the things that I really liked about Stephen's videos, and even your very first one that was very low production values, is that there was a real intimacy and genuine quality about it. The fact that it didn't look like a slickly produced marketing video, I think, was really great. And I had people remark to me that in being able to access the subject at a very interpersonal level, and not feeling like they were restricted because they didn't know about the subject matter, it's actually made them become interested in the art market, whereas before they felt like maybe I'm just not smart enough on this topic to engage. So I actually think that the pandemic will be a huge turning point for the art market, because I think that dealers are going to have to figure out ways to stay connected to their audiences, and new ways and new means that feel like a genuine connection that you'd have with going into a back room, and not a connection that feels like a marketing brochure advertisement. So in many ways, it's I think doing a mix of some of the things that Stephen was talking about, where it's partly video, but not videos that are too long, because I don't think that people want to spend an endless amount of time watching Zoom videos, sort of short snippets, interesting exchanges on social media. But I do think it's an opportunity. What I'm hearing over and over again is that people who are interested in buying now have more time to sit back, educate, take stock. One collector in particular, he told me that because his profession is in accounting, so he was a little conservative to start spending right now. But he said that what he does is he has a list of his top 10, and every day he looks at it, researches it, contemplates it, and is ready to buy, but is just holding back. And in the interim, he's also self-educating more.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
You know,
No.
well, one bit of feedback that I've had from some collectors is that they've really enjoyed the art that they've bought, and that, you know, it surrounds them on a day-to-day basis, but they're always so busy that it's almost become decoration. So they don't really look at it. It's just something on the wall. And now that, you know, they haven't left their homes for 2 months, they're talking about how much pleasure that these art objects are giving them. And it's something that I think they took for granted, and they feel really grateful for having made these purchases, because it's really helped them in the last 2 months.
I was going to say that in response to Leah, that the change in the amount of travel everybody does, and that everyone is sort of at home with accessing the stuff online, I think is also going to change people's habits of how they want to buy it too, because it is that way. But like Stephen says as well, the importance of the arts and priorities, I think, are really getting shifted, and looking also about, you know, not seeing ourselves as individuals, more as a collective, I think is really happening because of COVID. And I think it is drawing interest into local art, like Canadian art and art from here. And I think another thing that might happen with with the actual content that we have coming up in the future by our artists will be a reflection of the society that we're going through now. So it's going to be very interesting to watch. You know, not only will the market change, but the content and how it's delivered and seen. Like I think it will all change after this.
Yeah.
I appreciate those points of view. I mean, what you were saying, Sarah, makes sense from like a general way I see people, or I myself tend to purchase or research things these days. I usually go online and then I may go in person to purchase something pre-COVID. You know, the online is always there as like a research tool. And what you were saying, I've also heard, Stephen, that it's given people who are established collectors of art kind of a better appreciation for their collections. I have heard of, you know, collectors being concerned about the state of some artists and galleries at this point and making an effort to purchase right now if they can in order to support artists who they already maybe have collected or who they've been interested in but haven't really taken the plunge yet. So all that's really great to hear. I think it's mostly the question of habits. Like the art market has often proved itself exceptional to general retail or market trends because it's seen as a luxury product, for one, and it is often, not always. So it's really a question of habits I'm interested in part, and how habits can shift and change from that face to face.
There is transparency that seems to be happening now with there's a lot more people like with photo that Stephen's working on, that where you have the prices online, galleries are putting that, making it so people can buy. So I think people also, before, where there was sort of two tiers, there was or two groups, there was a large public that's interested, passionate about the arts in a way, and then there's the collections, the collectors that are looking at it, you know, as acquisitions, as investments. But the whole online, I think, is going to make it easier for a larger group of people to connect in a way, because it is much more, like Stephen says, before you used to have to walk into his gallery. Now you could go online and see that. And one thing I have been doing weirdly during this pandemic is I find the Instagram Live are great, because I can be doing something and have my ear and be visiting with artists, hearing their thoughts, and people don't have to, it's not like the Zoom meeting where we hear the cameras on us. You can have your earphones in, you just listen, you can look over if you want and see what they're doing. But I find I'm finding it incredible that I can just visit with all these artists, thinkers, writers, you know, things like Sarah's doing. It's all there for us to enjoy, and we can choose our level of engagement.
So I think the ecosystem is very much changing and transforming, and I think that the relationships will still be there. I'm seeing that people who are major collectors, anybody I've talked to who's a major collector is still collecting. They're not putting a pause on it. And then I'd be interested to hear Stephen's how things are going with the auction and how with your gallery. But another thing that I'm hearing a lot is that if there's a reluctance to purchase, it's the really big ticket items. It's like the superhero sculpture or something that you really want to see in person, but that works on paper, photographs, where people feel like they can get a sense of it online. That is something that people are moving ahead with. Even painting as well. But Stephen, how are you finding that it's impacting you?
Well, I find that, there's a few things. Like, one, we're not making as many sales as we were before COVID, but we're certainly appreciative of each and every sale that we're making. That, you know, a lot of times there's so much of a day-to-day that goes on, and, you know, you complete a sale and then you move on to the next one. Whereas, although, you know, my team is all at home, you know, if we sell a photograph, we're doing these virtual high fives because, you know, it's a really happy part of the day. And So I think like we're more appreciative of the sales that we're making. So that's one thing. Like our big focus now is that we're moving into being open by appointment, and that's an area that I think is it's important to tread very carefully into to reopening. And with us, we're trying to make sure that we're maintaining a safe environment, so people will feel safe when they're here. And to do that, like by appointment only, it's just one group at a time. And so, and the group has to have masks on, no groups of more than 5 people. We'll wear masks while we're talking with these people. We'll ask them not to touch things. But when they leave, we'll be doing a wipe down of any surfaces that might have been touched by these people. As an example, if they pull a book off the shelf, we're going to ask them just not to reshelve the book. So, if we feel that it needs to be sanitized, then we can sanitize it before it goes back on the shelf. Keeping one washroom for staff and then one washroom for visitors. And if the visitors use it, we have to clean down that area after they leave. And to be very transparent with the public about what our procedures are, so that if someone comes to the gallery, they know that, we have their safety and our safety of prime interest. And I think that's going to be key for people, because I was talking to one colleague who was in a zone that was, their province was opening before Ontario was. And, their plan was, well, I won't let more than 15 people in the gallery at any one time. And I just broke out into a cold sweat when they gave me that number of 15, because their gallery is fairly large, but not that big. And if I was a single person in a gallery and I turned around and there was like 13 strangers that had come in and one person has a bad cough, I'd probably never go back to that gallery again. So I want to make sure that we don't make those same sort of mistakes. And I think it'll be important for galleries moving forward to have very clear protocols, so people feel protected when they go into a space, or when, they dare to venture out, because, it might be quite a while before people want to congregate again. But I can't wait for that to happen, for me to want to ramp up my business, because if that's 18 months away, that I know my gallery won't be able to survive for 18 months. So that, this transitional stage is important, but, I don't want to put myself, my family, or my staff at risk. And by the same token, or any visitors that come into the gallery, I want to make sure that everyone's safe and it remains an enjoyable place for people to come.
Stephen and Christina, are you both planning exhibitions for the fall? What's happening with your exhibition schedule?
On our end, some galleries here in Quebec are opening now. They were allowed to open outside of Montreal a couple of weeks ago, and now in Montreal they're allowed to be open. I decided not to open it this summer. I'm going to do video programming that people can see from outside. But the fall, we are planning a quite interesting installation, and hoping that people will be able to come. Maybe we'll have to do something, as Stephen said, of the appointment only, small groups, but worst case scenario, we're making it so people can view it from outside the gallery. We are also a street level gallery with large windows, so we always try to make it that if someone comes when we're not open, they can see the shows, they can see what's going on. So that's not ideal, but we've sort of moved our schedule. Some of the shows that were scheduled, we really want to have. The artists have made the work, solo shows that they were waiting for, so we're going to just move them into the future and see the fall one. we're going to leave it up for a long time. So can we open it in September? Can we open it in October? Can we open it in November? I don't know, but it's hard, especially for the artists who preparing for these shows for so long, and then anyways, but what can you do? There's also the whole digital side that Stephen's been exploring with the photo that AGAC has now with their app. I don't know if you've all tried the collect the app, but it's augmented reality. So because the elephant has a lot of digital works, we're trying to think, how can we work with that? So, I've just got another second VR headset. I'm trying some things at home. We're talking about doing things with people. We have Skalwanati, one of our artists, has an Aboriginal gallery. She opened in Second Life. So I went to my first opening at her gallery the other week in Second Life, and it was interesting. You actually go there and you know everybody. Yeah, so I don't know, it's just avenues to explore of different ways we can get together too, I guess.
Yeah, and for mine, there was 2 exhibitions that are framed and ready to go that were both postponed because of COVID. And so I'll be continuing to discuss with those artists like when they feel ready and to put it up on the wall. And but apart from that, I haven't, there's the exhibitions that we had planned for the summer, because I usually book about 18 months in advance. So the exhibitions that were planned for June through December, I got to get the list here. Yeah, so that there were 3 exhibitions from July through December that had just been postponed indefinitely because I don't want to go to the expense of framing and preparing for exhibitions if we remain by appointment only, because I'm not sure it's worth the expense if you can't congregate. So like one idea I've had with, the 2 exhibitions, because one of them certainly wants to have their exhibition in the fall. And so one suggestion I had was like, well, one part of the problem is people sort of backtracking. So, if we wanted a stream of people to come through, we could have arrows on the floor to guide people through the exhibition, and you come in the front door and we have a fairly nice alleyway out the back. So it might be that people just stream all in one direction. I don't think that would be ideal, but, I think that would be the only way to get like 150 people through the doors on a single day, which is usually how many we have at an opening in a 2-hour period. So, the idea would be not to have any events that would cause people to congregate, but maybe we could still have the same number of people. And so the show opens from like 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. and you have this stream of people going through. And but again, that's just not ideal. So trying to figure out when the program exhibitions will be as much up to the artist as it is to me. And then I'm developing a wait and see attitude with everything that follows that, because it could very well be that dealers go back to working how they did in the 19th century, which was just to have a few examples of work on the wall that is by people that you represent. People come in one at a time by appointment, and the solo shows are really up to the museums and not something that commercial galleries would do. And that's more, for me, I'm working on different scenarios, it used to be, my first scenario was if we're closed down for as much as 2 months and then 3 months. And so now I'm working on scenarios of 6 months and 12 months and 18 months. And if it looks like a lockdown is going to happen for 12 to 18 months, it's a fairly large gallery space. And if I'm not using it for solo exhibitions, I could certainly see sharing the space with other dealers that need a space, to show as by appointment only. So I've got sort of a lot of different balls in the air, or different scenarios that I'm running, so that regardless of what happens, at least I've got a plan in place.
I think that's fascinating in terms of talking about an approach that moving back in, sort of forward in time, but back in time. And one of the things that I wanted to ask all of you is that, like, when a wonderful artist that a collector wants to buy is producing work, and I will take this moment to spotlight the photograph behind me by Sara Angel, who Stephen represents. And Stephen, I want to say I'm really happy that I bought this work, because I spend a lot of time in this room. And as Leah was saying before, it's so great to be able to enjoy the work, the art that is around you. But I was going to say, if when a collector is interested in an artist, and here's if the artist has made new work, if you love the artist, you just want to know, like, what is out there and what's going on. So Leah, you just wrote such a great piece for Canadian Art Magazine. I'm curious to get your sense on the amount that artists are still producing. Like, are artists who are, particularly, that for me, that's one of my concerns about the art market, is what is coming up on the market. Are artists able to still produce with an energy and vitality? Because I think if they are, then Stephen's certainly shown there is the ingenuity to get that work into collectors' hands. But one of the things I think we need to talk about is the artist piece in the content that's being created for the market.
Well, I think Stephen and Christine, being in close dialogue with their artists, would probably know better about that than I do. But one thing that I was thinking about prior to this conversation was around what is the importance of the art market to people who are actually not collectors, not artists per se. So what I'm getting at here is that when you were talking, Stephen, about having exhibitions by appointment only, that totally makes sense to me, or visits by appointment only, with several works arrayed by different artists on the walls. I was thinking that's like, I totally makes sense from a safety perspective. But one thing that's lost, I guess, if the art market shifts in that direction, from my perspective, is the opportunity for passersby who are just interested in art to learn more about art, or to see art and tune their eye or tune their taste by visiting exhibitions in person. Because one thing I was reflecting on was that even though when I first started looking at art, the easiest places for me to go to look at it were student galleries, artist-run centers, and commercial galleries, because none of those places have entrance fees per se. That doesn't mean that there's no barriers to entry. There definitely are, and it can be intimidating environments, all of them. But one thing I think that the commercial art scene has added, like, value to, in terms of just people who are interested in art, is an opportunity to see new work, an opportunity to see new exhibitions, to see new artists' work, sometimes to see historical artists' work from the stable, even if they are contemporary artists. So I just wanted to speak to that aspect of loss too, in what may be coming for the art market, because I don't think there's always a really good explanation out there, or kind of clear understanding of the ways the different parts of art systems work and don't work together sometimes. So when it comes to the art market in particular, that's one thing that if in 18 months, like you've been a dealer for a really long time, Stephen, and in my eyes, a really successful one. So if you can't make it 18 months through this, like, you feel you'd have to dramatically change or close your gallery, and you're quite well established in terms of the Canadian context, I'm just thinking, what are the implications of that kind of thing? If even really well established dealers, by and large, cannot survive a shutdown like that, I guess. So I was thinking about what does the loss of those spaces mean, even if you're not directly transactional or curatorially involved in the art market as a player. So I just wanted to speak to that too. And, you know, there are implications I understand for publications like the ones I work at, like as advertising, if there can be no events, then whether at museums or commercial galleries or artist run centers, then there can be very little advertising in art publications, like from, you know, C Magazine to places like the Globe and Mail doesn't rely that much on art advertising. Yeah, but our publication definitely relies a lot on advertising of events to which a lot of people are supposed to go. So then a change in the market also affects what publications can do to a certain extent in terms of quantity of content production. That's just for us. I know that the Art Institute has a different, you know, model that's not advertising based, Sarah. So it's not the only model, but I kind of just wanted to point to a couple other implications of where a contracting of the market affects people beyond it in the arts.
I think it's a great point to bring up because it's, although I think the retraction of the art market happened once the dailies stopped doing reviews of gallery exhibitions. Like we noticed that quite a bit, that, you know, it started, you know, you could notice it in the Globe and Mail, like it, and also in the Toronto Star. But also Now Magazine used to be a real coup. If you could get a review in Now Magazine, you would double or triple your traffic like the next week. And that all started to cease like 3 to 5 years ago. And I think it was a gradual thing that not a lot of us were really conscious of because the market was pretty active and there was, you know, especially coming out of the economic crisis, there was a lot of fervor for people to get involved in the market and they found it interesting and fascinating. And then for some people, it also became a social outlet for them to go to exhibitions or go to art fairs, you know, around the world. And it really became an important activity, but I noticed a real change in the people that were coming because, you know, every day it used to be a bunch of new people that I'd never seen before that I would have engaging conversations with. And then it started to be, well, I know all these people, like not that many new people were coming in. And it was especially evident when we used to do group exhibitions. And, you know, one time we did an exhibition called Antarctica. And, you know, there was a lot of Arctic people that were interested in the Arctic that read about the show because it got reviewed in like the 3 papers. And there were swarms of people that were coming and they were a breath of fresh air because they brought an interesting and new insight into the photographs we had on display. Many of them made their first purchase ever in an art gallery. And I think 90% of them would never go back into a gallery as long as they live. But they were really happy that they came. They're really happy with what they purchased. And, you know, I helped them make this important connection. And, you know, that was all part of the enjoyment. And a lot of that has been missing from the marketplace, I think, for the last like 3 years anyway. So this has sort of compounded it. And so that's, I mean, one reason I'm doing the auction with Heffel is that, you know, most of the people that are on their database, you know, have never heard of my gallery. So, you know, whether the auction itself does well or not, at least I'm meeting a whole new group of people that I didn't know. But to your point, they're already art people. It's, you know, and I think all of our Instagram followers and Facebook followers or Facebook friends, I guess you call them, that I think they're all part of the art market as well. So I think it's very difficult for us to get outside of this bubble right now.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time, but yeah, I think that general kind of siloing of the way information is consumed, that's actually in some of the international and American art media, they've talked about, especially the pandemic, as perhaps being a case in which the biggest galleries just get bigger because they have the greatest kind of silo or footprint for their existing brand and followers and purchasers. But it's much harder for the middle-sized and smaller galleries that have less of that kind of capacity to build on, or like critical mass to build on in the online space. That's the thing. We encounter this as a publication all the time too. It's like the internet's an endless, like a bottomless pit, right? You can just like throw content into it. It's never going to be enough. But it's like, well, how do you get noticed within that? You know, if you're trying to connect with new, or make in our case, a new reader, you know, a new community member, it's a lot more difficult to cut through the noise than in a physical street side or layout. You know, that's been the reality for years, but I feel like it's something that could be exacerbated by this pandemic moment where we're all kind of reliant on online.
Yeah, but Sarah, how do you find? I find in a way that journalism and publications seem to have more relevance now since COVID, and people are realizing, you know, we need this to be connected. We want people who are thinking about these things. How are you finding it, Sarah? It's your...
I think they are, and I think people, as I said at the beginning, people are really seeking out education. But what Stephen is saying is so true, that the loss of the sort of daily coverage of exhibitions, it just it's sort of been a perfect storm with the demise of art sections. Like they really just have, for the last 2 or 3, maybe even more, but there's so few good visual arts journalists that are left in this country. Like, thank goodness for Canadian art. But you're right, Leah, like what you're saying is that within the art market, there are, you know, people in restoration, framers, like it goes beyond the galleries and the artists, and those are all people who are supporting Canadian art as a publication. So it's a challenge. These are things that are very real challenges in terms of how to connect with audiences and how to connect. But I mean, I do think, Stephen, you said that most of your Instagram followers are followers who live in the art market, but I would actually disagree with you, because I've been following your Instagram feed, and your gallery is doing a really good job with hashtags, and I think you know, some of the wonderful material that you've been putting up in the last week, I think you're going to find audiences through the hashtags of people who are doing searches of, you know, for hockey players or political figures, etc., who may never have known about your gallery, but will end up finding it that way through social media. So, and it's a challenge, but I think that's where at some point in the conversation, I said that this is sort of a turning point in the road, because I don't think the art market's going to disappear, but I think it's going to be the ingenuity of individuals and galleries who are constantly thinking about, how do I connect with my audience? What am I going to do? What platform works? We're in a new landscape, in a new terrain. You know, the one thing I can say with a lot of certainty is that the interest is there. Like, the interest is there 100%, the desire to purchase, whether it's through seasoned collectors or whether it's collectors who want to enter into the market. So in some ways, I think galleries' ability to communicate, to connect, to do what they do well, it's going to be about pivoting into the new reality, and so but I think what is the optimism I find is that the strong interest is there. And I think the period that we're in right now, we're so at the beginning of it. So I think everybody's just sort of recovering from the initial shock that we had in March when I was speaking to people. So the Art Canada Institute is an organization that is 100% donor supported. So it's many people who are also collectors. And I was talking to people who were worried, like really worried, almost that an apocalypse was coming. Like, that, you know, we didn't know, well, were we all going to be in hospitals in 1 month? Were our loved ones going to perish? etc. So I think even this conversation right now, it's just at the very, very, at least the sun shining outside, summer's beginning, but it's so soon to be able to tell. And I think we're just getting over that initial shock of learning about, and it really happened fast. Like I remember thinking, when Stephen canceled his 25th anniversary party, thinking, oh, well, it's going to be, probably in the fall, like September. And now thinking about that, you think, what was I thinking? Like September? Like, are kids going to be going to school then? So it's a lot for all of us to process. And the nice thing about art is that there's a relief in moving away from our world reality by looking at it. But I think we're in fascinating times and frightening times, and I think the art market is going to continue, but there will be an evolution.
I don't know about all you guys, but that sounded pretty great as a summary that Sara just made. That was like very well said, I must say. Are there other things that we haven't touched on? Any of you? I think, Sara, we never addressed your question about artists. I think in that, and I don't know about you, Stephen, but for my artists, so many of them travel all the time. And so it's been strange in one way is that they don't have the residencies or things like that, but they are all still working, and maybe even more so because they don't have that travel speaking element right now to their careers.
Mm-hmm. There's that. I think that there's some people I know that I was talking to Sara Ann Johnson a couple of days ago, and she's busy in her studio making great art, and so she's been on a very forward momentum for quite a while, and because hers is very much a studio practice, that she's able to continue to work sort of almost unfettered. But as you're saying, Christine, that there's a lot of people I know that don't know what to do. Like Larry Towell just got a Guggenheim Fellowship, which will enable him to work on this North American project, working in indigenous communities, but he doesn't have access to these communities right now. So he has to write the Guggenheim to tell them that, this whole thing's on hold right now because I can't work and I don't know when I can work.
Right.
So it's, and I think, there was a lot of people that were really depressive about the whole situation, and they didn't know, initially, what's the point of working? And, they were just too upset to work, and they found the new environment completely debilitating. Whereas there was a few people that found it quite inspiring to actually want them to engage with the community and they wanted to move forward, and making art was the only way they knew how to move forward. So it's affecting everyone in a different manner. But it's,
sorry,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, no, I was just going to say, but the biggest point is that I think that the one thing that the question that I haven't been able to answer to people is like, so, I think I might come out of this with an interesting project, but then what happens? And I don't know what to say, because it's like, well, I don't know when we can do an exhibition of it, or is this an online only thing, or not?
Yeah, I've had it's been strange because I have some shows happening in Europe, and they've been on us the whole time. Like, is it ready? Are you shipping it? We're like, what world are they living in? Is it like what? And as far as I know, like we're shipping next week. Skalwanati for a show in the Netherlands is supposed to open July 6th, I believe, and here in Montreal, I know the Phi Center is planning to open at the end of June with an exhibition about sort of post-COVID exhibition. As far as I know, that looks like it's all going ahead, and Sabrina Rate's got work in that. So there's also this interesting dynamic But I don't know if it's like you, Stephen, and the rest of you, but I find I haven't been bored yet. I haven't been sitting around wondering what to do, and I think a lot of the artists are often under the gun, and it seems like all my artists are no one's enjoying this time, but they're doing things differently and maybe doing different things than they'd be able to do if they were traveling all over or things like that. But they are all making new work. Is there anything anybody thinks we need to add about this for after? What anything we want to see, any changes we want to see, or what's after coming up? Or did Sarah say it beautifully and we leave it there? Or
she said it beautifully. You said beautifully, Sarah. Just one thing I just wanted to raise too that I mentioned to Christine on email before this conversation, that this whole question of the art market in Canada during or post-pandemic made me think about was, you know, it's a time when a lot of groups are going to the federal and provincial governments, business groups of all kinds, including the art dealers associations, saying like, we need support, you know, for rent relief, eviction protection. And I guess I'd be interested to see the market in general in Canada and elsewhere come out of this or move through it with also a sense of what are its responsibilities to a public good. I mean, I think that people have a sense of that in the backs of their heads, and different dealers are different. But as I mentioned to Christine prior to this conversation, you know, last year there was a ruling about unethical art dealing related to the Norval Morisot forgeries and false provenance. There's also been some conflicts between, you know, some auction houses and the Canadian government. Internationally, there's been a lot of more legislation codification around the ways the art market in the past, pre-pandemic, was a great place for money laundering, unfortunately. I'm not saying anybody, I'm just saying those conditions are true, right? That it's been a market that's been largely unregulated and in which codes of conduct have often been lacking. So I guess one of my hopes, and it's very idealistic, you know, is that art dealers, associations, and come out of this with maybe even perhaps a clearer sense of what do we owe to the public good if we're asking the public good to provide for us right now. You know, we do a lot of work for artists. We do great work making art better known by and large, but how can we stop the bad actors in our sphere, you know, who bring down, you know, the case we can make towards a public good being done in our market?
I think we're going to see, not just in the art world, I think in all the worlds, we're going to start looking more holistically at our culture, I think. And I think, if anything, this has brought out, as we said, the priorities changing, looking at all the players, AGAC, ADAC, you know, they do have the codes of ethics, and, you know, it's a small world, and you know, everyone knows each other, so it does happen. But I've always also advocated for Canada-wide, like Carfax said 5% artist resale right or something like that they have in California or in the UK. That might be something that maybe in cases where people have sold their work, I know a lot of this affects a lot of Inuit artists, that they could then, if later on their work sold for more or sold in the secondary market, it's all things to work out. But I know Stephen and all of you, it's a small, pretty strong community in Canada that's working, that, you know, we're all in it for the passion is what I've seen.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of risk undertaken by a lot of dealers too. They don't have illusions of that, like financial risk and a lot of heart as well.
Yeah, and for me, I would hope that there's more of a coming together, because when you're mentioning the silos, that I always see the Canadian art market as all these different silos. Like even, in Toronto, I mean, there's like 5 different fairly distinct groups that don't really interact with each other very often. And, and I think, there hasn't been time to do that. And, or maybe, I think there's been a will to do it, but not a mechanism to do it. And now through things like Zoom, I mean, having a cross-country meeting is pretty simple to do. It's great when our Toronto's on and then dealers from around the country are coming together and artists from around the country are coming together, and so are the collectors. And, it's like a fun convention week. But then everyone, you're so busy during the fair, and you might go out at night once or twice, and then, it's a long day the next day, and then, the week ends, and then everyone's exhausted for a couple of weeks. And then nothing really happens until the next year. So I would like to see this sort of strong community bind together a bit more cohesively, and maybe with some direction in mind, so that, we need some sort of goal, because I don't think the Canadian art market has really ever had a goal before.
And
maybe
we do have the best art in the world. So if we all work together, then, we make more people know that.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
There's, could be some good opportunities there. And like, I was really happy to see that AGAC and ADAC got together to take Ottawa.
Yeah.
I think that's the first time those 2 organizations come together.
It is.
So I thought that was a great step forward.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It is making people see what we have in common and what's important and what we need to do.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much, all of you.
Great to be able to chat with everybody and to see you all. And hopefully before long in present.
Yeah.
Yes.